We're just setting a stall out for surveying the tool head off the Shaper. So this is the moving section, that's the fixed section that is attached to the front end of the ram. It rotates, but for our purposes that's not relevant at this stage. So the winding handle sits here, clapper box sits here, that's down, that's up. That's around about end of the stroke that way. So most of its work is done in this area. By my assessment initially, I thought that the wear would be towards the bottom end. Having sat and thought about it, the bottom end, it can be retracted to about there, and as I say, push through there. Anyway, if we take it off, show you what we've found. This is set up with a flat gib, which is that, which has got a nice big banana kink down it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 jacking screws, and then a fixed side. In terms of surveying that, basically, other than checking that that's in a flat plane, there's not a lot else we're going to do beyond printing it later. So putting that to one side, what we're then checking, a visual inspection of the surfaces. This one shows some very fine shadow of a previous scrape and possibly the odd mark on here, but there's nothing that I can feel with my dodgy finger, and I have barely anything on a finger that's got some sense in it. So what we're going to do is we're just measuring up those widths. You have a pair of dowels. You're supposed to use hardened ones. I haven't got any, so I'm just using the same pair of dowels, which are a piece of silver steel. To do that, I'm using a 3 to 4 inch mic. It's graduated in thou. It'd be better if it was in tenths, but it hasn't got the vernier on it. Taking a measurement, making sure that I've got the anvils across the diameter as opposed to just above or just below, and I'm getting a consistent reading, which is always handy. So ignoring the fact that it's 3 point something inches, what I'm really bothered about are the thou. So I've got 287.5, 287.3, 286, 285. So for give and take, I've got near as damn it 2.5 thou wider at this end than at this end, which, despite my best thoughts, I thought the wear would be at the bottom, but not. The wear appears to be at the top. So when we come to scrape it, we know that we've got to take 2.5 thou out of the bottom end. What I'm not sure about, and this is probably going to be one of my questions on the Practical Machinist forum, is do I work on the basis of this one stays true as a flat plane, and then we take the 2.5 thou off this side, or do I take 1 3/4 off here and 1 3/4 off there to even it out? That I'm not sure about. That's about it, I think. Next job is, other than a visual inspection, to see if I can see any marking, and just going to recheck this area to make sure there's no crap under there which is giving me 2.5 thou difference. I can feel something here, but the surface is not great because it's had rust over it. The sequence for scraping is those two first, which is these two flat planes. Then we use those to print these two flat planes. Once we've printed that, we'll then use the standard to print that angle, so that angled face. Once we've got a neat, nice, even print all across there, and it's then parallel with those two, so it's not twisted and canted, put that on, and we print then the fixed side, and then we will use the measurements to get that in something like parallel, and then use the standard to print that. I'm going to make a new gib because, as I said earlier, this has got a bend in it there. It's almost snake. It's a bit snotty. It's got a lot of pitting from rust and some galling on it. Yeah, that's where we're at. Right, so we're still set up. I'm going to give these two light scrape over before we take the first print, and we'll see how we're sorted. I've said it before, but there's some good quality instructional videos by Muller Nick and Stefan. I'll put the link in the next video. That he's just made two introduction to scraping videos. Well worth a look. Keep your eye open for Stefan's sandals. Bit of white spirit to help the stone cut. Just going to work the edges a bit because it's had a few bits of blunt trauma in its life. I think there's a comment on the last video I uploaded, which is I think update 14, and somebody's made the comment that if this shaper could speak there would be an awful lot of moaning. You can see the two burrs here, not burrs, dints from this side, so they're polished up. I'm going to give them a little bit more work. So the rotation point is around about there and there. I think the print, yeah, print shows that quite clearly. So now we go over and take off the areas which are printed. And remember, you're taking off the area, not just the blue. I would urge anybody that's not done scraping and thinking of doing their I don't know, lathe cross slide or whatever, do a big piece first, even if it's just a crappy old surface plate, because it is really more tricky doing, in my view, smaller pieces, because you can't really get a feel for the stroke. And it's a lot easier to start on longer strokes and then develop your technique to bring them down shorter. Well, I think it is anyway. Could be talking crap as usual, but who knows? Got to fill up the video with something. This section of cast is a lot harder than that. Remember, at this stage we're still rough scraping because we've got nowhere near a print of any use. One of the bits of feedback I've had is that my rough scraping's too slow, and I need to take wider cuts and be less fussy about it, and I would take that on board, particularly if I was trying to make money out of it. given that my vast experience of about 4 months worth doesn't amount to a great deal of time on the scheme of things. Leave it as it is. Obviously the wider the scrape, the more force you need to push the tool through. So it is somewhat dependent as well on the size of the part, I guess. You can't give it an awful lot of oomph if you're only working on a thin part or a small area. Well, like that anyway. But I do fancy making up a pull scraper though, and I've got the parts to build myself a little propane powered kiln to heat up some silver steel to make the tip. So hopefully we'll include that in a video at a later date for your viewing pleasure. This is, in my view, it's the second scrape where you get an idea as to how far out of plonk it is. Because if I get a duplicate of the same print, and I know it's much further out of plonk than I initially thought. Got to make sure you get all that spirit off, because it ruins your print. That's my better finger. Just feeling for any burrs or rubbish. Just rolling the ink back out on the plate. And that's where we're at. I've just realised I've put it in the wrong way round. This end should be up that end. I do envy these guys that can attend a course and have somebody that knows what they're doing showing them. And that beats a bit of a tuition. The more personalised the better. Certainly a lot easier than doing that steel gib that I did the other week. God, that was a pain. I think I've got the joy of that on making the new gib for this. Be nice to surface grind it, but my surface grind is only 7 inch strips 10. Thankfully it's not bellied in the middle, so it's not rocking end to end, so that's going to save us a bit of time. So it's now just a case of keep scraping each end in until we get a print top to bottom. I wonder how those guys got on that were in Norway doing the Richard King scraping class. And if you're watching, drop us a comment, let us know how you feel, what you're up to. Send us a link to your own videos, even if it's just a few photos of what you've been up to. Norway or Denmark, one or the other, I can't remember which it was. I've only been to Norway once when I was 40, in the winter, in the snow, photographing. Loved it, every minute of it. Yeah, this section here is really hard by comparison with the soft cast everywhere else. Maybe it wasn't as thick and it's not gone down as deep when they machined it. So it's still got a bit of the chill on it, in it. I'm just making sure I'm removing all the blue, otherwise it's never going to sit down on the newly scraped surface. One of the things I've negated to mention is I could have took more off this end and less off that end, which for all intents and purposes would have tilted the head forward or backwards. I didn't want that. I wanted to keep it in the same plane. So what I'm trying to do is take the equal amount off each end so that the ends spread towards the middle. Now that's got a big underlying assumption with it, which is that the wear is predominantly evenly spread out. Now, given that when we surveyed the female face that this fits to, the wear seemed to be towards the top end, which is that end, in which case this end needs to go down a touch more. But then by the same token, it doesn't make a huge deal of difference in terms of the geometry of the machine if this tool head isn't actually presented at 90 degrees to the work surface in terms of the plane that it's at. If you think differently, let me know in the comments, because I might have missed something. Pivot points are still the same, they've not changed. It's still there and there. So that's the first pivot point up that end. I'm not actually moving my arms in this, I'm just swaying my body backwards and forwards. A lot less effort involved, especially when you've got a big backside. So Mr. Summers, if you're watching this, I'm sure you'll be very familiar with the not using your arms on stuff. Save the effort. So we move the rotation point from there to there and from there to there, and we're aiming for there and there. You see that? So whilst we got a print all over, the rotation or hinging as they call it suggests that we're not actually flat. So we're going to carry on doing what we're doing. We're going to give it all a nice clean scrape over and then start taking it from there. We can't be a million miles off now in terms of a flat plane. So we're going to reduce the stroke lengths. You hear the difference, definitely biting more here than it is there. And that's starting to skid. Clean that off and take another print. I'm also going to clean the plate back on my head on the camera. I'm just cleaning off the blue before I stone it, because there's a lot of blue on there and it does tend to clog the stone a bit. Well, I think it's the blue sticks the cast dust into the stone. So hinging points moved over a bit further and a bit further. We're getting there now. So I'm going to give it another scrape over, take off some of those, see if we can point them out, some of the higher darker spots. Again, we're on shorter strokes, and see if we can get that hinging point right. Yeah, I've been up 7 hours. Stomach's telling me it's lunchtime. You see that? So the rotation points moved there and there. And we're still actually just rough scraping, so I'm not starting to look for bearing points or anything technical like that. So I'm just going to go back over it again, same thing again, short strokes, one scrape apart, and I'll try and get 3 rows down each side. And I've got to remember to keep rotating my direction of start. Put a bit of light on. Problem when you put too much light on is you get reflection off the scraped surface, which then your eye can't adjust to see past that to get the blue spots. That's when the contrasting colour comes in. So I don't want to be doing that just yet. Just for good measure, we're going to go over it and do another scrape the other way. So the rotation's there and there now. So that's the rough scraping pretty much done. We'll now start picking out the high spots. A bit light in this area where I've leaned on it a bit more, and we're going to pick off basically the darker grey points now, bring more of the surface into contact. And I'm going to bring you back when I've sharpened the blade. Might have to bring in an intermission period with some dancing girls to liven things up. Had a slightly awkward conversation with the good lady. I was sat at the PC searching eBay for something to do with metal shaper, and I'd put in the search metal shaper. Some interesting lingerie came up. Raised a few eyebrows. A lot of backtracking on the discussion. And then in the bodger. So we're a bit low in that section. A few lows in that. Hinging's fine. So we're never flat. So it's just a case of keep working it down now. I'm aiming for 20 points per inch. To put that into context, I shall get my sophisticated template out. Back of my cereal box. You can count them. It ain't there yet, especially there. I mean, what have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. It's probably about 15 or 16, but it's only about 30% coverage. Whereas if we go there, you got what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Yeah, it's about 23, 24, and it's about 50% coverage. That's what we're looking for. So, rinse and repeat, and Tom Lipton's your fella. Well, as in true cinematic style, my camera ran out of battery. I've checked the marks we've got, and it is 5, 10, 15, 17 cycles. So I've done about, I think it's 4 since the camera went off. I mean, it's mildly light there, but coming in, there's a bit of a spot there. But I mean, if you put it into context, my finger ain't that big. So I'm happy to say that that's perfectly fit for purpose. Again, I could carry on working the high spots down, get rid of this area here, but if we put our well, I'll tell you what I'll do, I'll sample it over with this and show you the sample results. So we've got 18, I forgot to write that one on, 19, 27, 23, 20, 23, 21, 25, sorry, not 19, and the ones this side are a bit smaller than a square inch. So what's that, 15-20%? So I'm happy that that's good enough coverage for what I'm doing. So we clean that lot off, and then we can ink that up and use it to print the mating face. For those of you paying attention, you'll have noticed the use of the Sharpie to show up the marks a bit easier. Definitely recommend using Sharpie on the as a background colour. It's got no thickness to it, so it doesn't really affect the overall print. It does make it a hell of a lot easier to read though. So let's see if we can get a I'm happy with that as a finish. Not that you can bloody see it when it's running. Right, so we put that down and we'll load up the other piece ready to start printing on that. Bring you back in a mo. So we've given it a light scrape on both faces, and we're now going to print it with the piece we've just prepared, which we've some ink on. I'm going to print it so the orientation of it is as it would be on the machine, so that's the clapper box, that would be at that end. I'm sliding it so that the flat faces are not coming into contact with each other yet, then lowering it down. Sounded to me like there was a bit of crap in there, so we're just going to shunt it backwards and forwards. A bit of sideways movement. So obviously there's no gib in there at the moment. I'm going to lift it, pull it off. I'll bring you down for a closer look so you can see. So we've got no ink at the extremes on that face. For all intents and purposes, the other side is a copy of that. So not a lot of ink at either end, which basically means it's been doing that. So we've got to take down the middle section on each until we're getting prints at either end, and then take the lot down parallel. That's the plan. I've just ground the bevel on the top of the tool. Come on, focus there, that bit. That enables me to get pretty much into the corner of the dovetail. I'm going to leave the two extremes and just do this basically an inch either end will be left. I'll do everything in the middle. Now what I can't do then is come back at that angle. I've got to rotate the piece to do it, so I'm going to nip round and do this side while I'm at it. And I'm going to rotate the part. I'm just thinking about the sound of my voice on this video, and it sounds as if I'm saying this is how you must do it, and it's not at all. This is how I would do it, or how I am doing it. It's how I am as opposed to how you should. Maybe you should wait until I've got the shaper running and find out whether it works properly or not. So remember, the part's now reversed from how we last printed it, so we've got to print it from that side with a thick end at this end. Now here's the thing, when you're rubbing your fingers over a dovetail, as I showed on one of the earlier videos where I was doing the box section, I can't get my fingers tight into the bottom of that dovetail. So you do need, I would suggest, something else fairly clean just to get into the back of that dovetail and remove any crap. I suppose you could use compressed air if you don't mind more shit in the air than there is. Right, I'll just smooth the ink out on my other part. So that's the clapper box end, so thin end at that end. And I'm lifting the part up so it runs onto the dovetails and there's a gap. Drop it down. All I'm looking at doing is basically getting rid of some of that hump in the middle. Can't feel it rock anywhere, but it must be. Bring you down for another sneaky peek. So we got a bit of progress towards that end, not much there, and about the same as it started. So I'm going to keep doing that until I've got prints at all four corners but nothing in the middle. I'm going to give it a couple of heavy scrapes. I'll bring you back in a bit. So that's another 5 cycles, and apart from it being a bit hollow there, we're printing on the end and down through there. You have to excuse the crappy lighting. I can't see a thing. Hang on. We're printing on the end, and pretty much through the middle of that one. So we're just going to now start working on dropping the blue points off and getting a bearing surface. It's a bit tedious and you've seen it all done before, so I shall bring you back when we're doing some counts. You'll have to forgive the slightly heavy inking. The bare patch running at the inside corner is where the gib strip sits, so there isn't actually any contact there. Other than that, I would have said that's getting there. I haven't checked for clearance in the corner of that dovetail yet. That's something else I've got to do, which is basically fit the other part, push it over so the corners are so that this face is in contact, and then just make sure it's not binding. If this face is off, then it means that I've either got to scrape clearance into the corner of that, or scrape away this position on the other piece. Most of what I've read suggests scraping away the inside corner, and yet the guy that I spoke to that basically machine restorer all his life was his view is you scrape that part back, file it back, because it's of little value in terms of strength or alignment, whereas if you keep chibbling away into that corner, you ain't doing much for the overall strength of it. I think both are acceptable as long as you use a bit of common sense. Right. I'll just give that a couple more cycles just to get I'm happier with the print I'm getting now. There was a bit of dilemma as to what was the next thing to do. You can either do the angled face on this, and then bring that one into parallel with it, and then use that to print the moving part, or you can do it the other way around. I've elected to do the moving side, which is actually longer. It's 10 inches as opposed to what, 6. I've made the pattern up so I can print pretty much the full length. I'm half an inch short, which I can live with. So I'm going to print this one, get it so I've got a nice even print all the way along. I've had a, I don't know whether you could pick it out, but there is there's machining marks, but there's some very, very light signs of scraping in there. So it has been scraped at some stage. So I'm going to scrape this edge, get that so it prints nicely, and then use this to print the fixed side. Once I've gotten a nice print along that face, I'll then bring that one into parallel with it. If you remember, there was a 2.5 thou of wear at the top end. I've concluded that as this face was the one with the gib strip on it, and the gib strip is steel, I'm figuring that this is going to be the one that's most out of plonk. So I'm actually going to take that as straight and bring this one in. So I know that this corner here will be about 2.5 thou to come out. But I'm going to remeasure it now that I've established these sides, and I'll do that once I'm ready to print that. So that's where we're at. A bit of a pain because without some kind of double vice setup or tilting vice, I'm working on a face which is not horizontal to the floor. Just makes it slightly more complicated. It's a bit easier than standing on me here doing the ram dovetails. So we'll see how things progress. It's a smaller area. I've got to dress this where this chips come out as well, and I'll do the matching corner at a later stage. Cheers. Right, so you remember the rolling pin. I'm printing off the angled face. I've been asked via email, why did I make it such a big face? I didn't want it to distort, so I wanted it reasonably sort of chunky. It happened to be the size that the cast iron was, and meant minimum removal of gear. For the extra time scraping it, I don't believe it's really given me any major problems. It does give me the opportunity to spread the ink at the top thicker and then bring it down with the roller to reprint the bottom area. Bit like putting the ink on one part of your plate and printing off another part. Thought that could be just good fortune. Anyway, bit of a sod because the lighting's less than ideal, but we're printing in there. So I'm just going to dry it off because I've cleaned it all out after deburring it. I've given it a light scrape over. Fingers crossed. So the actual piece is about 5/8 of an inch shorter than what I'm trying to print. So I'm just going to print the bottom end, and then when I've got a print that I'm happy with on that, extend it 5 inches up. So I'll go in flat, drop it into the groove, let it rock forward, and then I'm just guiding it with this hand. My right hand's just moving it. I can tell you now it's not rocking about much, so it can't be a bad finish surface. So you can see it's took the ink off pretty evenly. A few heavy spots when it's hard on. I'll bring you down and show you the print. Now I would have said that that was pretty damn even. Now bearing in mind that on the mating face, it's the top end of it which is showing the wear. I would have expected the middle section of this to be worn, which would be this sort of area. It's not jumping out at me, but there we go. I would expect this area the least worn, for the simple reason it's seldom that you run the shaper with the tool head fully extended down. I mean, on this shaper the tool head stops, there is, damn it, where it is there, so it can go up and expose the internal dovetails but can't go down. This one's slightly different, it will extend, it's a couple of inches below. So anyway, that ain't going to take a great deal of work to bring that in, he says optimistically. So I'm not going to bore you with the details of me scraping it. If I can get it set up so you can actually watch a couple of cycles, I'll do that. Well, if I get in the way tough, all I'm going to be doing now is just putting in a finer line of scrapes, getting a bit of depth into it. I've got the scraper tucked into my shoulder and I'm scraping with the corner of it, and I'm not lifting off after each stroke, so there's a back scrape as well. I'm just looking at getting a bit of a depth to them now. So my arms are barely moving, it's only I'm doing it all from the waist and stomach, I guess, which is handy, having a gut. Oh. Just filling in the blanks where I've missed. Go back and do the way. We'll make these a bit wider apart. Sorry. These little short ones I am using my top hand. Right. So before I deburr, I'll just show you what that looks like. It ain't ever going to look pretty inside one of them because the access is so hard. I'll deburr it now and then drop the print in again. Bring you back when we've done that. So spread the ink again. So we're hard in here, a bit hard at the back there. You see the darker spots. So we'll do a bit of picking out on those and just refine the surface because it's fairly even. There doesn't seem to be a huge amount of wear in there. So And as I say, this section doesn't actually go down between the dovetails, because you've got the big bushing here which the lead screw goes through. But as I understand how dovetails work, these are the actual load bearing surfaces, and the dovetails are there a guide surface. But I've been known to be wrong in the past. I have to say, access is a pain. Trying to get a rhythm going and getting the angle of attack consistent. You want a pattern maker's vise, which clamps the front of the bench, swivels 180. I think it swivels 180 degrees either direction, so effectively 360. As you're looking at the front of it, but it also tilts up and down. There used to be an American made one which was I always hankered after when I was wood carving, but they're a lot of money, and as I don't wood carve anymore, I don't need one. Would be handy for this though. In the book Machine Reconditioning, I can't remember the author's name, the guy talks about a work table, which is basically a T-slot table on a pedestal, adjustable height, and a rack and pinion gear to adjust the angle of that the work table is presenting the work to you at. And when you're doing smaller parts like this that you can get onto a decent sized work table, I can imagine that be worth its space. I haven't said much about it, but you are supposed to keep going at 45 degrees to the angle of movement of the slide. I can only, my understanding is so that any lubricant that's stuck in the grooves is moved one end to the other depending on the direction of travel it's going. In the process of doing that, you get like a smearing effect coming over the edges. I feel a lot more confident scraping now than when I started. I think the muscle memory is helping, and very quickly you learn which muscles to use. Got a bumblebee just decided to visit us, so he'll be buzzing around boinking into stuff. And I spotted the little Jenny wren going back into the nest box, so that must be trying for a second brood, which is nice. Right, just open the window and let the angry bee out. I haven't got to put any weight down because it weighs quite a bit, and gravity's effectively pulling it onto the surface, which is more consistent than me pushing it. So all we're doing is now, we're just still taking out the darker spots, we're just breaking up the blue. Again, we want to be looking for something in the region of 15 to 20 dots per inch and making them fairly broad. And because of the angle of attack of the cutter on this, I'm going to get quite broad scrapes, certainly broader than I've got on these. Right, enough of me babbling on, as Phil would say. I'll bring you back when we've done that face. That's 18 cycles, and I'm getting to a stage where I'm thinking, yeah, that's getting acceptable. It's not easy getting a picture of it. Anyway, to give you some dimensions, the length of slope is 5/8 of an inch. So if you take that, you can pretty much, oh, come on, focus, you swine. Yeah, can't get it. Anyway, it's I'm happy to call that done. We're averaging between 15 and 20 dots for a linear length of an inch, but it's only 5/8 of an inch deep, so it should be a high dot count. They're broken up quite well. I could carry on, but I'm happy to say that that's done. Besides which, there's a cup of tea and a cheese sandwich calling for me. So this is the non-gib side. I'll give it a very light scrape over, and I've printed it using the internal face of the moving section. And if you remember, this is the end, which is 2.5 thou wider than that end. I did say I was going to measure it, which I'm going to in a moment, but it does suggest that it's only touching up there. I've touched that over with a file. Now I'm wondering whether that section where it's picked up there is because it's actually swelled out when it got thumped. Anyway, we're going to stick the dowels over it and measure it again, and then start scraping that back. That's after 11 cycles. Needs a little bit more breaking up on this bottom end. And it's a bit hard at the top by the look of it. It's difficult to tell because of the angle of the thing, but it definitely looks a bit hard on the top edge. But it's coming in nicely now. I've actually swapped the scraper. I'm now using this little God, it's hot, can't think. Carbon steel. I've ground the bevel away so I can get right in. It's slightly smaller, it's easier to wield, easier to aim it. So another half hour and I should see this done. That's 11 cycles. Well, I think I'm okay with that. I don't think it'll take long before that bed's in and it's pretty even all the way along. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So I'm going to actually remeasure it and just see how much I've taken off. Just for the sake of completeness, that's the same print, but that's taken from the standard, which has obviously got more points per inch than the scraped out slide. So you can see there's plenty of contact there. So I'm now going to measure the width again, just see how much I've took off this side, and then I can take a decision on what to take off to the other side. Well, for those of you paying attention at the earlier section, you'll have probably worked out already. Mr. Bozo's been Thanks Tom Lipton for that one. This was the worn end, this was the least worn end. When it was printing at this end and a tiny bit on the end here, and what I've done is I've taken this end in, so for all intents and purposes I've pivoted the end round, so I've actually reduced that width by 1 thou, so I've now got 3 thou wider here than here. Now I could correct it by going back and redoing this, which would reduce the amount of chip that is, but not by a huge amount. So what I'm going to do is correct it by doing this end. So I'm going to bring the gib side in, that end's got to come across 3 thou to nothing. Yeah, twat. Well, that's 15 minutes of rough scraping, and we're within 1/2 thou on width. Come on, focus. There we go. So you can see it's just rough scrape now. So I've took nothing off this end. I think it's slightly wider in the middle, which I'm going to work on it by printing it now. Because as good as the micrometers are, they are only really, you're guessing anywhere between, for 1 thou mark, I can split it to quarters, but it's within 1/2 thou on width now. So I'm going to print it with the standard from this face. Put standard on, lift it up. Just try and get even bearing coverage now. Right, if the dog lets me do this, I'll show you where we're at. I had to change the orientation of it because it was killing me bending over double and trying to scrape it. And this gives me the benefit of gravity working on towards me. So you can see the print top edge. Verify it with the, oh, that's my camera wobbling over. We'll verify it with the scraped off edge. I'll move the camera and bring it. It's got very hot today. Must be at least 16 degrees. Yeah, dead excited. I've now got it so that I can't measure any discernible difference between the two sides, so they're in parallel. I'd got it to within 1/2 thou and then started doing this and measured it again and it wasn't moving, so I've brought it down to basically I can't see any difference. So now I'm just bringing in the bearing surface, and what I was trying to do was get you a shot with the camera showing the scraper. Bear with me. What I wanted to try to show you was using the high carbon steel scraper, because the consensus is tungsten carbide gives you a better life and cutting edge and blah 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 blah, and yeah, it does, but unless you made of money or you've got facility for making one, you buy one like me and stick with it. But having got an edge on this now, it's actually a lot easier to manage because I'm only working on a small area and I'm getting perhaps 3 cycles out of it before I touch the edge up. It's a hell of a lot easier to handle it than the big one doing this finer detail work. And I think one of these, this was a new old stock on eBay. I think it was £8 posted. That doesn't even buy a tungsten carbide tip for the other one. Now admittedly you have to sharpen it, and it takes a bit of getting used to, but it's certainly no more difficult than sharpening a turning tool. And then for redressing it, there's that's the diamond stone, and I just scrape it along, rotating it like that. perhaps do 3 or 4 strokes to try and get a consistent edge. And if I can get the thing to focus, yeah. So I've only got the one face, but as I say, the only reason I'm doing this video isn't to show you how to scrape. It's just to say, if you were doing a compound or cross slide on your lathe, it's around about a weekend's work. I was up to sort of 120, 130 quid's worth of scraper plus tip plus a diamond hone, maybe a green wheel on your grinder. I haven't got a diamond wheel. I can't afford one. With a bit of effort, you could use one of those. And some of the more industrious chaps could probably make one of these out of an old file. Saltwater quench, I believe. Makes it is bloody hard on the end. Anyway, enough of me babbling on. Well, that is, as far as I'm concerned, done. Worked out all right using the trapezoidal rolling pin. And basically this lightweight carbon steel scraper. So I'll clean it all up now and have a look at what I've got to do to make up a Gibbs strip.